Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond BMR. I am your host, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. The show goes beyond just cryptids and Bigfoot. We take a much deeper dive down that rabbit hole, taking on subjects beyond our very own realms and what we perceive as reality. We look at strange phenomena and the unexplained, such as time travel, alien, and UFO existence. We explore how all of these rabbit holes somehow come full circle under or over the umbrella versus our separate planes or wherever that rabbit hole leads us. Tonight, we have a great guest. Ronald Murphy will be joining us, along with my co-host Tex, who I'm going to bring up here in just a moment as I fade away the music. Slowly but surely. Hello, Tex.
Howdy.
I almost pulled that off smooth. You know, I jumbled a couple words reading in the dark. That's the next thing I need to do is get that new intro memorized.
Well, you know what? You don't stumble on your worst day as much as I did last night. I mean, it's... I could not make a sentence to save my life.
You know, there were so many shows, and of course, I'm with Texas Front Porch, and obviously, I was watching that show. I was a part of that show, but I did miss the first half hour doing something with the trick or treaters. But yeah, Tex. But you still pulled it off, you know, like only you can, and. Actually, it was a pretty good Halloween show yesterday. I thought it was fun and entertaining.
It was, you know, it was a guest that we'd never had before, and I didn't tell anybody, counting y'all, who the guest was.
Yeah, no, that was a treat.
And she's fantastic, and we met. You know, they called me to do an interview with me about the upcoming Dogman documentary that they're doing. And that's how we met. She's one of the producers and for Small Town Monsters. And
yes.
And
I was actually, you know, because I was on the show, Jason was on the show, we're all talking, and you'd made mention about having a new guest come on, and you know, I was like, what? I was trying to, you know, beating my brains out because I usually do all the bookings, so Texas kind of. And I purposely did not schedule anybody for that day. And then when Heather Mosier, when she popped up, I was like, oh my God, one of my favorite shows. I mean, I love that show. I'm a subscriber, and it was cool to pick her brain a little bit and talk to her, you know, as a person versus, you know, the general, you know, business aspect. Yeah. And she's really nice, down to earth lady. And that was really a treat, so to speak. For Halloween. Yeah. And of course we went on. Then we went on and we closed out for Jessica Jones on her Halloween special, which also was awesome. Who was on now? We closed it out, me and Jason, who was Josh Turner, Jeremiah Fountain, Daryl Denton, and a couple others. I'm sorry if I forgot your names, but I wasn't at all the shows. Such a busy day, but that was great for Jessica, and I was happy to see that go well as well. Well, today for Beyond BMR, I'm going to bring up Ron. You ready? I'm going to pull you up here. We've got, there he is, the Cryptid Guru himself, Ronald Murphy. And something tells me, Ronald, I don't know how, I kind of have an idea of how the Cryptid Guru name got coined. But instead of letting me say who did that, well, why don't you speak on that?
Sure. So the first time I wrote a book on the paranormal, I was contacted by Dave Scott out of Spaced Out Radio, and he was just getting started. He was probably only about not even a year into his career as a paranormal talk show host. He asked me to be on his show. We hit it off. He's a great guy. Our personalities hit it off. And then he started to have me on about once a month. And one day he came up and just coined the term, hey, the Cryptid Guru, and it stuck with me ever since. I was blessed enough to do a show for the Travel Channel called True Terror with Robert Englund, and they were actually going to use that as my byline. But the network refused to use that, unfortunately. Hey, just for 1 second, I want to show you my granddaughter that's moved. This is actually her professional appearance on the show.
All right.
Never before seen on radio or on podcast. But I heard her saying, "Pap, are you around here?" So why don't you go return to mommy now, and I'll play with you in a little bit. How's that sound? All right, great. Thank you very much.
What was her name?
Be good and Santa fill your stocking this year.
That's right. That's right. That's
cold.
it. He said he'll fill your stocking this year if you go see mommy.
Yeah, there you go. Because we have, as Jason, like I don't say it as much as Jason, if at all, but if Jason was on a show, well, he would be referring to text right now as Santa text.
Santa text. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So So and you have a connection with Dave Scott as well too. I think that everybody that's in this field, somewhere or the other, has some connection to Dave Scott, and the paranormal world is better with him in it.
Yeah, I agree. He's a pretty nice guy, and I talk to him quite frequently. In fact, I do when called on to do his cryptid reports on the weekends. Duke Sullivan is the mainstay over there. He's been doing it for a couple of years now. But when Dave's in the jam, he gives me a call, and Tex and I have both been on the show many times. He's been on our shows, I think, like 4 times. So yeah, he's a great guy. So big shout out to Dave Scott. Why don't you subscribe to him if you have not already? Hit that subscribe button, of course, after this show to listen to it.
Watch this show first.
Watch this show. And while we're into all the promotions, Ronald, before we get started, I know we got you for a little over an hour or so, and we already spoke for 10 minutes. Why don't we right now tell everybody where they can find you? Or I know you're an author. You've got 30 years in paranormal research, cryptid research. You got it all. I think they coined the phrase in one of your books, the man where nightmares began and ends, or something like that. I'm just off the top of my head, but I want you to tell everybody where we can find you.
Well, you can find me. I'm not very good with self-promotion, and I know there has to be a business side to this thing, but I'm not very good with that. I'm not technologically savvy. Yeah. So if you want to find out what I'm doing, you can go to my Facebook page, Ronald L. Murphy Jr. That's my author page. You can find what I'm doing. You can friend me under Ron Murphy. I'd be more than happy to take friend requests. But if you want my books, the best place to go is Amazon. That's where everybody does everything. So as you're compiling all of your Christmas lists, and you think, what can I put into that stocking? Text, you know what to put in that stocking, and that is a copy of one of Ron Murphy's many books.
Awesome. That is true. That is true. And hopefully, hopefully the orders will go through and we can stock them and everything and get them out to all the young people and even the older folks, you put a stocking up there, who knows, you might get a, Cryptid Guru book in your.
That's right. And not one of my books take batteries and there's no assembly required.
Okay, there you go. Can we? Okay, never mind. I don't want to get to, since you're talking about, like, I was just saying, what about audio books and all that? But
you know what? I wish I could. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I suppose you read it and then record it. But I was lucky enough to get about 5 of my books picked up by Walmart. So if you're at your local Walmart, if they do not carry it, you can at least order it through Walmart.
Okay, great.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Put a pin in that, and after the show, I'll talk to you about that.
That sounds good.
Awesome. And I'm going to say to our audience listening now, the people in chat and the people are going to listen later, this is going to be a great show. And Ron was going to reveal to everybody or talk of his wealth of knowledge in all these fields. So I got quite a list of things I want to ask him. And we don't have enough time for everything. So Ron's already been kind of in the process of being rescheduled, maybe in the next couple months to come back. But please listen and get his books, listen to his stuff, because he knows a lot, and I'm going to learn something tonight. And starting off, Ron, what was one of the first things that got you involved with the paranormal and cryptids and all these other things that you're into?
Absolutely, 100%. It's my mother. My mom, who unfortunately passed away back in 2001 at only the age of 55. She was just a young person, just a few years older than I am now. But we were very close growing up, and she had a love for everything paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, and we would have our own little movie nights, So I was a child in the 1970s, but this is when things like In Search Of was on. If you guys can remember that with Leonard Nimoy, and shows like That's Incredible. And all, The Legend of Boggy Creek, all this stuff was coming out. And it was a great time to be a kid. And I remember vividly on Saturdays, she would put me to bed at my regular time. And I remember she would wake me up at 11:30 at night, just as the beginning of Chiller Theater was starting, right after our local news. And we would watch Chiller Theater together, probably to about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Great time. I mean, what else could you ask for? And then, I had a love for reading, and I got to go to my library and search out great books. But I went to a Catholic school, and the library there was small, probably about the size of, your standard living room. But I will tell you, amazingly, that library was packed with cryptozoological books. It had Eric von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods there. I am convinced that one of the nuns must have been some sort of closeted paranormal investigator or vampire slayer. I'm not sure which, but look, my youth was surrounded by the possibilities of things out there, in the periphery of mankind. And I've stayed with that wide-eyed wonder ever since. I still believe in the possibilities that there's things out there. And like you let off the show was so eloquently, the idea of these rabbit holes, they're everywhere. A lot of times we walk over them. Most of the times we don't notice them, but occasionally we will fall down one, won't we? And that's what we're all in the process of doing right now. We're all free falling down our very own rabbit holes, and we're anticipating when we hit the bottom.
Yeah, this kind of what this show is all about. I mean, we all, we have 6 shows. We're on Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot Mission Rob, the Serial Papers, Cryptid Hunters, Jessica Jones. We're on like 6-7 days a week. We're all cryptid people. We all have different. We all bring different things to the table. But I wanted this show to be more specifically about those rabbit holes. And Tex talks about it all the time out in Brown Springs. Tex, I can't speak for Tex, but I have an idea with Tex that it was Dogman, Bigfoot, and then all of a sudden paranormal things started moving in. And we've recorded over 100. Believe it or not, Tex, we got over 100 Brunch with Bigfoot shows you put together. Amazing, and and the things I've learned from these people, from these great guests, researchers, people, and the experience things, it all circles around back, doesn't it, Ron? I mean, if it's a cryptid, a Bigfoot, a Dogman, but there's always something else that drives you down that rabbit hole. They're all related. And we can be talking about anything, different dimensions. We can be talking about ghosts. We'd be talking about paranormal entities. It's just all is one big cluster. And that's the purpose of this show, is try to figure out what those are all about.
Right. And that's good, because what you have is you have camps of investigators out there, because usually somebody experiences things and they're not coming onto the shows. They're coming to an investigator. And nearly all investigators have their preconceived notions about what's going on, and they fall into particular camps. So if you are a Bigfoot investigator and you're in that flesh and blood camp, and somebody comes up to you and starts talking about things that happen out of the usual, a creature vanishing or something like that, well, the flesh and blood investigator is likely to throw that report out, and it's never heard from again. It's never followed up on. And the same thing with UFO investigators. And there's people talk about ghostly happenings around UFO encounters. Again, that is a red herring, and it's either not reported or completely overlooked. The rabbit hole, my friend, is all encompassing, in my opinion. The paranormal is a gray area. And now that we have the proliferation of the internet, instantaneous experiences can get out there. And whenever it's getting out there and it's not being filtered, what we are discovering is not only the similarities in various encounters, whether they're Bigfoot, Dogman, UFOs, ghosts, not only the similarities, but also the interconnectivity. Not only are they similar, but somehow they're intrinsically connected. So it's that let's see what we could call it. It's kind of like that furnace out of which these things emanate and they're created. It is something that I think, just as investigators are coming into in the past few years, this is very new, that we're able to talk about this lucidly and intelligently, because beforehand, this was the domain of crackpots, right? People talking about seeing a Bigfoot running through the woods and all of a sudden disappearing or not fully formed. That makes no logical sense. And I will tell you, whenever I started my research years ago, that made no logical sense to me either, until I started to encounter things like this on my own. And then all of a sudden, the world doesn't make any sense. And I am convinced that these monsters, these cryptids, these whatever we want to call them, are working within a physical reality that is different than our own, but occasionally will bleed into our reality.
So with that, you would believe that, let's say on a typical cryptid, I mean, there's other things I want to get to, but now that we're on the subject, like a person that sees the Dogman or a Bigfoot that just kind of appears out of nowhere, right? Or kind of disappears into nowhere. So what you're saying then is that, which I believe, so you can correct me, and I know none of us are total experts, right? We just go about our research and talk to people daily like we do. So are they going on a different physical plane then?
You know what? I do not know. That's the whole thing. Like, we don't know exactly what's going on. I will give you my little experience here, give you the Cliff Notes version. So I've always been interested in werewolves, the idea of shapeshifters or what have you. And as it happens, there are a lot of people out there that witness and report werewolves. You find that hard to believe, but that's absolutely true. So it's probably been about, maybe nearly 20 years ago now that I was on my first expedition looking for a werewolf. And Dogman really wasn't that part of our vernacular yet. That wasn't a word that I don't believe that I even was aware of. And so we were on a werewolf hunt at this particular place that is very isolated, out of the way. And whenever I was down there, it was after dark. The camera equipment starts draining, as if you were involved in some sort of ghost investigation. And then I start noticing orbs of light, which this is where it starts getting, it still raises the hackles on me, even though this is, 2 decades away from the incident. But I'm starting to see orbs, not only through the camera that I have, but with my naked eye. Something is going on. And then around me and above me, it looks like electrical discharge, like whenever you pull the blankets off of a bed. It's that kind of static electricity that was going on. I thought, I have no idea what's going on, but I've got to get out of here. It's that flight or fight response, and it's telling me I got to get out of here. So as I turn around to go down the trail that brought me where I had ended up, a light emanates in the trail, and it looks like a flare lights up. It glitters for a moment, and then it goes out. Now, the problem is, to get back to where I parked, I have to go down that trail. There's only one way in and one way out, and that's the way. So whenever I got to the area where this light emanated, I immediately hear something off to the right in the woods start following me. Okay. Now, again, my mind is playing tricks on me. My mind's not playing tricks on me. My mind is now informing me of what's going on. Now, whether that's my imagination or whether that's the creature itself projecting itself into me, I've really not come to a solid conclusion on that. But in my mind's eye, I was being pursued by some sort of creature that in my mind was a werewolf type of creature. That's what I heard. We could hear growling. I was with another investigator at the time as well, too. We could hear growling. Something was definitely pacing us, but it was pitch black, and we soon found our way off the trail. Now, what is going to be really unusual about this, off to my left, where there's an abandoned cemetery, my name gets called. Just Ron. Simple as that. We turned towards where my name was called, and that took us back to the trail that we needed to be on to get out. So it is in my theory, in retrospect, that if we continued on without that voice being called, we would have stumbled further off the trail into the path of whatever was pursuing us. Again, none of this makes sense from an experiencer point of view, because there were so many different things happening at one time. But I'm convinced that that light that we saw light up was the doorway into which this other creature now entered our world. Because remember, we had just walked down that path and there was nothing there. Now, after we had returned, after the light had come on, now there was something in our world that wasn't there a few minutes ago.
You know, and for me, it's what started happening is you were running into stuff that, for a lack of a better word, overlapped, because you could not tell the difference, you know, what you were dealing with. And that's what we're at. We're trying to find a way where we can distinguish what we're running into, because it crosses over so much, you know. And just like, you know, just because you got something calling your name and stalking you, it may be two different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know?
I don't think that this was one thing. Again, like you said, what we were dealing with was an overlap, some sort of paranormal overlap, when a lot of things was happening at one time for whatever reason, you know, and I don't know what that reason was, but it was kind of like the perfect storm that was going on. Now, let me tell you another story, and this story is strange in its own way, but slightly different. Okay, so about 3 years ago, I lived in a place that was very close to the woods, and it had snowed the night before. And listening to the radio in the morning, we found out the kids did not have school. It's going to be a hell day for the Murphy family. So I smoked at the time, so I had to go out and get a cigarette because I was in for a lot of stress. So as I make my way out to the car, because I keep my cigarettes in the car, so I'm not, you know, prone to just smoking at any time. So as I go out, I see that the snow was everywhere, and it's pristine snow because it's about 7 o'clock in the morning, so nobody's been up and around yet, and school was canceled, so no kids have been out yet. But in the snow, I noticed tracks, which is extremely strange, and the tracks were about the size of my 6-year-old son's foot, very small tracks, you know. So I look at them closely, and I find out that I can see toes. You know, I took copious amounts of pictures as well too. A little bit smaller than a dollar bill. I thought, well, this is strange. It just snowed, so I want to be able to follow these tracks. So they start out not from the woods, but in the middle of my yard. And they didn't start out as a set of tracks. It was a right track, another right track, and then a left track, right track, as if it took a while to take on a fully physical form.
And this started in the middle.
It started in the middle of my yard, exactly in the middle of my yard. So there was woods about maybe 50 yards away from my house, and I assumed going in that direction, I'm going to find something coming from the woods. Indeed, that was not the case. It was in the middle of the yard. Again, pristine snow, no other way else to explain it. These tracks then proceed to come to my dining room window and stop at my dining room window and appear to look in because they were facing inwardly, okay? Oh. And then they take off over the hill, in which they suddenly vanish yet again. So as a Bigfoot investigator, now I'm starting to get the creeps because whatever was out there had some sort of knowledge about who I was, right? Because they weren't stopping at anybody else's window, right? They were stopping at my window. So is there a message in there? Is there some sort of omniscience there that we're dealing with as well? But that story still gives me the heebie-jeebies, even though I did not see anything physical besides tracks. What these tracks denoted to me was there was an intelligence out there sometime in my yard that took a while to manifest into a physical form, was able to check my place out, and then vanish back into where it came from.
Let me, I got a few questions for you. Okay. Just playing devil's advocate here. What kind of fence you have around your yard?
I have no fence.
No fence?
No fence.
Okay. The closest tree to those footprints?
We're probably looking about 50 yards to where the woods started.
Okay. Well, anything in the front yards or the side yards?
Nothing. No, nothing like that at all. I started to put it out too, because, you know, look, I try to be skeptical. So I try to put it out. Was it some sort of bird, you know, that landed and kind of took off? Because birds can do that kind of stuff. You know, whenever they land, especially with the new fallen snow, they can kind of fluff up their wings and everything like that. That was my immediate impression, that it was that. Nothing like that, you know, no feathers, nothing like that whatsoever. But it was, again, still trying to work it through my mind there, Tex, because I'm a logical person, you know, and I wish there was another alternative. But what makes this story so incredibly stranger, if it can be, in the spring of that year, I decided I would go investigate in the woods around my house. Actually, I take that back. This wasn't an investigation. This was a walk with my kids that turned
Right.
quickly into an investigation. So we were walking, spring, damp, typical Western Pennsylvania weather. And guess what? I see the same gosh darn set of tracks again. But these times they were in the wooded area. So I could not tell where they ended or where they began. Again, took pictures of it. Still very small tracks, less than $1 bill. I contacted Stan Gordon. You guys know who Stan Gordon is, right? Reported the trackway to him. He said these tracks have been reported in Western Pennsylvania in my area probably for the past 30 years. I reported to Stan. He posted the tracks on his webpage. Within a week, those woods were now posted and off limits to people. True story. So this was land where people would go hunting. They would go riding their bikes up there. They would go walking. This was public use land for as long as I knew it to be that way. After these pictures showed up on Stan Gordon's site, no trespassing. That's weird, guys? That's weird.
That's really weird.
And that is not the first time that I've heard that. In fact, I heard that somebody was talking about it just the other day that it happened. And I think we're seeing it more and more. But if I don't know if it's logic or not, but with me it is that math, those dots kind of line up to me, and I don't see how somebody can overlook that as
That's
being
right.
a possibility or being tied together.
Right.
There's could have been a coincidence. Yeah, it could have. But
yeah, the mind struggles. We look for logic. It's kind of like pareidolia. We look for patterns and everything, but our minds also try to act and find out the pattern of logic and things as well too. If somebody would come up to me and say this is what it was, I would be more than happy to accept that. Absolutely,
right.
Because a small humanoid figure that walks in the snow with no shoes on, that can materialize and dematerialize at will, and was looking in my window, doesn't make any logical sense, my friends. I want to know what else is going on out there. That's the only conclusion I can come up with.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But the way what I've learned now since I've been really doing this hard last 2 years. I had an encounter 5 years ago, but since I've been with YouTube, with text and such, I really, do a lot of deep dives.
You.
Huh? Since you corrupted my mind. Yes, I know. Now I see demons around every corner, which kind of, in effect, Ron, is kind of a half-ass joke at best. I find that when a person has an experience yourself, or if you're out as an investigator, you might not even have seen a Bigfoot or a Dogman or a ghost or anything. But if you are out there and you're an active investigator and you open your mind to these things, I tell you what, they find their way in. I today believe that. 5 years ago, I would not have believed that. It's just my opinion based on what I've talked with other people. And I think the more that we expose ourselves to the elements or elementals, which I kind of would like to talk about a little bit, I think that, they can weed their way in. You're open-minded. They think that you're showing, giving them entitlement, actually, as to, hey, listen, I know what this person is into. Let's go see if we can mess with them.
You know what, Tex? You should keep them on the program for a little bit longer, because this is kind of the way I think as well, too. So I think whenever you have an experience, the experiencer acts almost as a Wi-Fi hotspot, that you have to go in there with an open mind and with the kind of constitution that I want to see something. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but I think that whatever is out there can feed off of that energy projected from you, number one. And number two, whenever something does manifest to the point that you can become an experiencer, that's almost like a circuit lining up and going off. And it's almost as if there's an unwritten contract between you and what you're experiencing. It's almost as if you're gifted it, but sometimes that's a wrong word to use, because sometimes people see that almost as a curse and something that torments them for years to come. But I do agree with you. I think in order for this, it doesn't happen to happen all the time, but I think that for this to happen a great deal of the time, there has to be almost a pre-accepted agreement, spoken or unspoken, that I'm going in there to find something and I'm open up to something, and that open connectivity then becomes the conduit for which things can manifest.
Yeah, I think it's, God, I hate doing this, but I'm scared that's what's going on with all the mind speak. I'm scared that's what's going on with a lot of the paranormal stuff happening in the woods. Is we want to experience something cryptid or physical so bad that we're willing to accept anything as that, and it does open that door even a little bit, and that's all they need is to get their foot in the door with you. And that's why I'm so adamant about people, when they do go out, they need to make sure they're protected, and I'm not just talking about physically, spiritually as well. And I think if you doubt I think if you doubt yourself and your beliefs, that's a chink in your armor per se. Because I do think there is a way to go out there and experience this stuff and not take it home with you and not have it attached to you. Because I haven't had any issues like that. And I've been right in the middle of, rolling around in the mud with these things. And it's either just blind ass luck or it's something I'm doing that's not letting these things come home with me. But it's so many people go out there, what we call open-minded, that I think we really, really have to be careful in urging people to do that and not be prepared also.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I do have a short story. I do want to get to the elementals as well too, while with time remaining, but I want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit deeper. That doesn't involve a cryptid, but it does involve something else very strange. So I taught for most of my adult life. Okay. So they found out that I like to do, ghost hunts and paranormal stuff. So the administrator of the school where I was at asked if I would take them on a ghost hunt, and I thought, this doesn't sound too fun. But anyhow, I was going to take them to a cemetery, and I was going to talk about some of the history there. One of the survivors of the Battle of Little Bighorn is actually buried there. There was about three survivors, and so I was pointing this out, and I started to feel pretty good about myself because I was giving them some history. Now there's some legend down there as well too, some folklore that back in 1781 there was a witch that lived in this village, and as it happened, the crops would start failing. A witch would have been the midwife, so children were being born, stillborn. Animals were dying. So immediately, the people in this area, which would have been predominantly Scotch-Irish, needed to get their village right. So you have to take out the witch. And as the theory went, they burned her at the stake. So I started to do some research because we all know the people up in Salem, they like to hang people. But I did find out that the last witch burning in Scotland was in 1737. So it's very possible that somebody that was living in this little town at the time either saw it or had somebody tell them. So they knew that burning a witch was the way to do it within their tradition. So as it goes, the witch was burned at the stake. And as the flames lapped about her, she said that she was going to send enough water in 100 years to quench these flames. And sure enough, as the story goes, 100 years to the day, the Johnstown flood came through and destroyed the town. Okay, so that's the theory that goes on there. But I told him that story. And it's creeped him out. But there was one other thing, and there was an abandoned train tunnel at the end of this long trail. It's about a mile and a half trail. and there was some people that died there in the 1920s. So I thought, I'll take them down there, give them a good scare, see what happens. So the train tunnel is abandoned. It's actually gated over, but there was enough room for a couple of the teachers to go inside, which they did. Makes good, Instagram pictures. But what I soon found out on my camera lens, I could not see this with the naked eye, but these orbs appeared to be, the only way I can describe it is dripping upward. So they were inside the tunnel, and it looks as if these orbs now are like drops of water that are coming up out of the ground. Now they start moving around the girls that are in there. There's 3 girls in there. Starts moving around them as if it's evaluating them, whatever it's doing, until it comes to land over one girl's face, and her face is completely blocked out. Now you cannot see this with a naked eye; it's only on camera, and it caught on multiple pictures. So the orb is there. Now I didn't say anything, but they started complaining about a sense of temperature change in there. And the one girl over whose head the orb alighted, over whose face, she claims now that she has a headache. So I want to get people out of there as quickly as possible. I'm starting to think maybe I took this too far now. So I hurried up and got them out. As soon as she comes out, the headache is gone. No more orbs or anything like that. So it's also quite dark by this time. So we start walking up the 1.5-mile trail to get to our car. And then off in the woods, we hear something. To me, it sounded as if there was a lot of voices talking at one time. The one girl that was with us after the fact, she said it sounded like chanting. Whatever. It spooked the hell out of us. So we took off, running to our cars. I feel myself being physically pulled back. I was wearing a scarf. My scarf is now gone. We get to the car. One of the teachers complains that she has this burning in her back. She lifts up her shirt a little bit, 3 scratches down her back. So, this was not intended to happen. They wanted to go out on a ghost tour, sure, some innocent scares and things like that, but this went overboard, okay? So we hurry up and get in our vehicles. We go to a restaurant. We try to talk about this, try to make some sort of semblance of what happened, but there really is no way to address this stuff. What happened was out of the usual, out of the realm of believability, but it did indeed happen to a dozen educated people on a Halloween night about 4 years ago. So strange things. So I get back to my house. There's no kids at home. They're all at sitters and everything. So I'm by myself. I go back to the house. I open up the door and I immediately jump back because I notice in my kitchen, all 4 burners are on my gas stove. Now, remember, we were just looking for a witch, the whole thing about burning.
Yes, right.
Now, all 4 burners are on. Took a couple deep breaths, finally turned on enough lights that I could in order to build up the courage to go up there, turn off the gas. Now, my logical mind saying, somehow before I got my kids out of the house, they must have turned on the gas. It had to have happened. It never happened before, but it makes sense. So I get myself finally to the point where I can breathe a little bit better. I figure out I'm not going to have a heart attack or a stroke. I'm okay. So I go to hang up my coat, and my scarf is hanging up on my coat rack. Yeah, I see. Again, we talk about this idea of things knowing you, okay? That story scares the hell out of me whenever I'm telling it now.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that, but
I got a little goosebumps. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. We got, I don't know, we've been going for 40 minutes. And I know, Ron, that I made mention earlier, great story, but to continue further on, Tex and I, we're dabbling now a little more and more, being more open-minded with this paranormal stuff. And I don't know what Tex knows about this, but I'd like a little education on the difference between what are elementals, fairies, and the Fae. Are they the same? Are they different? Are they evil? Are they good? Are they associated with cryptids?
These are excellent things, and this is the rabbit hole that I'm going down right now. And I've been free falling down this rabbit hole probably for about 5 or 6 years now. So elementals are basically intelligences within the environment. We can also, in some way, throw the jinn in there as well too. Even though they don't equate one for one, they still can be in that group as well too, because this is something that's ethereal. yet still in the environment. Okay.
Now, not to sound dumb, really quick, Ronald. When you say the jinn, is that kind of like the genie in the bottle floating down the river?
Well, that's where the name comes from.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. So the jinn are, of course, genies are very intelligent things. So the jinn are believed within the Islamic belief system of beings that are created from smokeless flame. So they are from the elements. So we have the elemental aspect of here as well too. They can haunt a home. They can they can inhabit a corpse and make the corpse seemingly come alive, and they can possess human beings. So you're talking much closer to the demonic whenever you're
Okay.
talking to jinn. But in the European context of fairy lore, um, fairies are ambivalent in nature at best and always to be avoided. So that is the thing, that they are within within the natural world, but like nature itself, they can be chaotic, right? They can give and they can also take away, and that happens all the time. Um, C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, he claims that he stayed at a home in England that was both haunted by ghosts and also haunted by fairies, and the fairies were far worse than the ghosts. So these kind of traditions go back. And then if you look in the Middle Ages, one of the surefire signs to know if woods were haunted is tree knocks that we now associate with Bigfoot. Okay, so as we start connecting the dots, we see these things coming together now. It's believed that you should not take food or drink offered from the fairy realm. And if you look at some traditions in the Pacific Northwest, the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot within these cultures also have been known to offer you food and drink that it's a taboo to take because you would end up in another world. One very famous fairy encounter that happened in the late 1600s involved Reverend Kirk in Scotland. And he was walking home one night and he saw a light emanating out of the side of a hill. Now, if this was in the 21st century, immediately this starts sounding like a UFO encounter, right? A light in the woods. So he approaches the light and looks in, and inside the light, inside the hill, is another world, basically. And it's inhabited by two different creatures. One is very tall and a beautiful type of humanoid, which could be, very much like the Nordics that people report. And the other type of creature was a smaller variety that we could, with our stretch of the imagination, equate with a gray. Well, anyways, he believed that this world of the fairies inhabited our world, is right. It's like up on top of our world. It's like a layer of an onion, one layer up on top of the other. And as it happens, the story goes that Reverend Kirk went out for a walk one day and never came back, that he was absorbed within the fairy realm. So these are the kind of things that we're looking at. What do we have to make, how do we connect the dots? Well, I think that we can see the idea of the UFO present within the fairy realm. I think we also see origins of Bigfoot stories as well. Now, to bring this really full circle and kind of focus this up a little bit, one of the greatest alchemists of all time was Paracelsus, and he was the father of mineralogy. He actually named the mineral zinc. So whenever you take a zinc capsule, you can thank Paracelsus for that. But Paracelsus also gave the word gnome to the gnomes, which, is mind-boggling. So he believed in order to interact with the world in a beneficial way, you have to recognize the intelligences that exist in every natural element. So in the water, you have the undine, which equates very nicely to the mermaid. So now you have these kind of things coming in. And of course, you have the sylph, which is the creature of the air. It starts sounding as if he's talking about a menagerie of different types of cryptids involved, okay? Now, we're going to do something recently here, and I saw one of your listeners here mention about the Chestnut Ridge here in Western Pennsylvania, and that's where I do the majority of my research. And this gentleman was walking up on the Chestnut Ridge, and this was only a few years ago. And actually, I was at a conference, and he came up and told me the story. He was walking, just going about his way, and he comes to an opening in the woods, a little glade in the woods, and he sees two creatures kind of jostling around, wrestling with each other. he couldn't remember if they were wearing clothes or not. He suggested if they had clothes on, it was so so camouflaged that it appeared as if they were wearing nothing. It was so natural looking. But these creatures were jostling with each other, and he called them brownies. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Now, brownies, of course, that's part of the vernacular because of Harry Potter. And if you go to the European tradition, brownies actually were beings that inhabited, homes. So seeing them out in the woods would be something unusual. But that's the word that he used to describe it. Saw these two brownies wrestling with each other. One of them notices him, and it takes off and vanishes into the side of the hill. And he was very adamant to explain that there was no hole in that side of the hill. It simply vanished into the earth itself.
Mm-hmm.
The other creature now, after it knows that it has been seen, it now goes through an inventory of shapeshifts until it becomes a very large bird and flies away. Now, that very large bird is also synonymous with fairy activity in Ireland, in a certain part of Ireland. Not only that, but in this part of the Chestnut Ridge, there's encounters of the Thunderbird there as well, too.
Oh, wow.
So, again, whenever we talk about the elementals, in my opinion, my friends, I'm coming to the conclusion that instead of looking for all these different types of cryptids out there, is it possible that there is a sentient energy within our natural world that is capable of projecting an image into our minds to suggest that we're seeing something that it's not? And then that's how it goes about its day-to-day life. Now, does that make any sense? Actually, this actually does, because we know that in the natural world, zoologically speaking, there are animals out there that create infrasound. We know that the alligator and crocodile does. We know there's a lot of cetaceans that do that. But we also know that giraffes and elephants and lions and tigers do it as well, too. Actually, there's been studies done that tigers can do throw infrasound, project infrasound to the ability that can actually stun its prey, which is crazy. But there have been a lot of studies done on infrasound because it has a military component to it, right? It's a way to
brown sound.
Right. It's a way to be confrontational without physically being confrontational, right? So what happens if these creatures that we call the Fae, these energies, are able to create an infrasound so we know to stay away from them? But not only that we know to stay away from them, but to know, but to somehow summon in within us this paranormal feeling. Because whenever the military studied the effects of infrasound, they reported that there was a paranormal effect, that people were hearing voices or seeing things that weren't there. Think about this. You're out in the woods. I don't want you in my territory, so I make you believe there's a 12-foot tall, hair-covered man-like creature out there, or make you believe there's a Dogman out there. We're not getting pictures of these things, right? Besides the Patterson Gimlin, that's about the only clear shot that we have. We get a lot of blurry things, though. We get a lot of blob squatches. To me, it looks like a discharge of energy, right, on that. That's what it looks like to me. So, my friends, is it possible that what we're looking for actually is an intelligent energy based within our natural world that has been with us forever, and it interacts with us on such a level that we believe there's things that are out there that really are not in front of us?
Well, I can't speak for Tex, but I think that kind of sounds like a little bit of Brown Springs, Tex? The way he so eloquently put that.
Yeah, and we're looking at that. We're also looking at the possibility of it being EMF, because all the symptoms that you just ran over, EMF can have the same effects on people.
Yep.
And
it's looking
that's what we're trying to figure out.
It's looking at an energy discharge, though, right? The EMF is still looking at some sort of magnetic energy discharge with the environment. I'm glad to find out, Tex, that you and I are brothers within the small town monsters world. Okay, I've done some things with small town monsters as well too. I actually did their DVD, American Werewolf, and so apparently you're on the second part of that, is right? So I'm actually filming a series with them called Sasquatch uncovered the ridge, or Sasquatch unearthed the ridge. So I went up there with a team of investigators. Heather Moser was with us. Seth was with us. All of a sudden we start experiencing light anomalies out of nowhere. Like out of nowhere, these light anomalies start coming. It affected the one cameraman so much that he was sitting down on the ground because he had no idea how to explain what was going on. So apparently these things can happen when they're being videotaped as well. And if anybody's interested, you can go to Small Town Monsters YouTube channel and look under Spectral Sasquatch. That's the episode. I suggest you watch all of them, but it's under Spectral Sasquatch. But we were looking for Bigfoot. We heard howls. We heard a couple wood knocks. Then we heard things like wind chimes, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we see these lights moving on in the woods. And I thought it was 3 guys carrying lanterns, until all of a sudden these lanterns start going up into the tree line. And then all hell breaks loose. When we talk about in the tradition of Western Europe, we talk about things of the will-o'-the-wisp, about these lights leading people off into the woods. And that is indeed what they were doing. One orb emanated in front of one guy who was so close, he said he could almost touch it. And he said it was about the size of a basketball. And I said to him, I said, what would happen if you did touch it? And his face went completely gaunt. And he said, I have no idea. See, these are the things that we have to talk about. Is this what happens whenever people go out in the woods and go missing? Or if you touch these things, is that now a way of taking you to the other world that has been reported in fairy lore since the very beginning? These are all very new. And nobody ever kept their mind open about this stuff, because when we think about fairies, we think about Tinkerbell, we think about Walt Disney, and none of it makes any sense. But my friends, I think that we're onto something here.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too about that. I mean, I'm picturing, I know you did a great job, bang up job on the elementals. I understand that way better today than I did an hour ago. But when it comes down to now the fairies or the Faye, are they number one? Are they the same? And yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm a rookie when it comes to these things. When I think fairies, I'm thinking about little snapdragons flying around that are ethereal, right? And, it's only in my backyard, maybe, or they just found in the woods. Can they be in my backyard? Can they be can they get in my house? Yeah. Are they transparent? I mean, is it an entity? Is it evil? Is it spiritual? You know what I mean? I mean, that's
right. Well, there's different ways to look at it, and we'll just go like historical context.
Yeah.
So by the time that we get to the Protestant Reformation, fairies were now seen as fallen angels, right?
Okay.
Whenever Christianity comes in first into England, they're seen as the manifestations of pagan gods. What happens whenever we have pre-Christian cultures? We probably see them as the manifestation of the elements themselves, right? The just the weather around them. But the bottom line is they seem to project some sort of frequency and some sort of vibration. Now, I wrote a book entitled, oddly enough, On Fairies, which is a huge book, about 80,000 words, just on the subject of fairies throughout history. And it's my belief, my friends, that we as human beings have been tied to this world since we first got here. We've been part of that vibration, that universal frequency that binds everything together. But what has happened in the last few hundred years is we have decided in our great hubris that we are going to step out of that vibrational frequency and be our own kind, right? No longer are we part of nature. We now subdue nature, we domesticate it, and we are separated from it. Whenever that great shift happened, is my belief that the things that we once knew were there now become our nightmares. These are the things that are out on the periphery. These are the things that whenever we turn our lights on in the house, we look out our windows into the blackness. That's the things that live out there, because we don't live out there anymore, right? We build walls around us, and we have subjugated the night with electricity, and everything now is instantaneous. Imagine being part of an agricultural society whenever you depended upon the natural world to give and to take. You buried your dead in the world. Everything was part of this cyclical nature. You weren't separated from it. You were part of it. It is my belief that we as human beings stepped out of that vibration, and now anything that is going on, all these kind of nightmares are now brought upon by ourselves. Oh, Steve, you can get it on Amazon, my friend. Go to Amazon, Ronald L. Murphy Jr., and all my books are available there.
And Walmart.
And Walmart, too.
Yeah, Walmart, yeah.
You know, it's when I first got into this, and I was looking at, you know, of course, my first experience with Dogman, and then, you know, had the Bigfoot sightings and everything. And I was pretty firmly in the nothing but physical camp. Okay. I'm not going to say ape camp, because I knew there was something more to them. Okay. As far as intelligence and that type of thing went. So I never thought that they were just a dumb animal. And a lot of people mistook what I said when I said they're an apex predator. They need to be respected as any other apex predator out there, as me thinking they're just a dumb animal. No. Same thing when I said I give them credit for the intelligence of along the lines of a killer whale. And a lot of people just automatically assume that, oh, that means that I think Bigfoot are stupid. Well, you need to go look at the intelligence level of a killer whale, because they are a lot smarter and a lot more sentient and a lot more self-aware than people tend to give them credit for. Now, then I got to running into stuff that I couldn't explain. And I still think there's physical creatures out there. Okay, I really do. But for some reason, we've got this other stuff that's either attracted to them or they're attracted to the other stuff. I ain't figured that one out yet. And this phenomenon, like we're talking about, and somebody said it earlier, it's a global phenomenon. It's not just a United States or a Canada thing. It is a global phenomenon. And I think to be that widespread, it has to be some sort of energy. I don't know what, but it has to be some, like you said, some kind of intelligent energy. So there's something else pulling the puppet strings of this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. That there's some sort of higher purpose to what's going on. Yep, I agree with that.
Now, whether it's good or bad, it's probably both.
It probably is, right? I mean, we can go down the lines, and this is not really here nor there, but a lot of times I'll get on shows and we'll have talks about spiritual warfare, which I think could be a very real thing as well too, and just the idea of nature itself really isn't, you can't label it good or evil. It's basically indifferent. Right. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of there's so many different schools of thought that we need to come back for another show, gentlemen. You have to be aware of that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that will come on either side and say about these things. But as you were talking, and I was listening and looking at the comments, so Lily Pond, she talked about this idea of shapeshifting, and fairies were able to shapeshift, and it was called glamour. The idea of making yourself appear differently. Well, fairies, as I said earlier, they are indifferent as well, right? They're not really good. They're not really bad. They're malicious. So it's very possible, like you had said, there's something behind this. And, if we were having this discussion, if there was a podcast 1,500 years ago, we would say that there was there's camps of fairies as well, too. There's the Seelie court, which is the ones that you could at least reason with, and the unseelie court, which is the ones that abduct babies and, you kill your animals and stuff. So it seems like even on that level, even on the elemental level, there is this constant state of flux going on. I don't want to say it's warfare, but there's a constant state of shifting going on. So you're pretty close to what I'm talking about as well, too, that there is something out there as well, right beyond our knowledge, that is happening that we know nothing of, but it permeates our world in some way.
You
Yeah,
know,
I call it. I've came to call it the cabin in the woods theory. So,
yeah.
Give me the nickel and dime version of your definition for the cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
well, you'd have to watch the movie Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
at the end where you find out what's really controlling everything.
Gotcha. Yes. Gotcha.
I know we're going to have you come back, Ron. I know you can't answer this question in 5 minutes, but if you sum a lot of this up to me, you learned about a lot of different things here today. And do you think, though, that really, you said that maybe there wasn't spiritual warfare, but do you think there maybe is paranormal warfare going on amongst all these elementals and other things that are just contriving and broadcasting out this negative energy in some instances in some of these really malevolent areas?
Oh, absolutely. So now I'm a religious person, so
Right.
But whenever we talk about religion, some people, start naysaying, and you get a lot of haters on YouTube and stuff. So you try to make it as academic sounding as possible. So as a believer, we'll put that out there, but we'll try to talk about the not. But it's hard to say because there is so much evil in this world. All this evil in the world makes me believe in the goodness even more, if that makes any sense. Because
for
there
sure,
has to be some sort of counterbalance to this, right?
There does, right?
Yeah, right. So what's going on right now is things are. That's why I was talking earlier about the idea of this vibrational frequency that we stepped out of. So we are all, I believe this wholeheartedly, all Mother Earth, all nature is supposed to be kind of in line with each other. This kind of frequency is we're all supposed to be kind of synced up in this frequency. And what happens whenever we don't sync up, it throws everything out of order. And I think that you can see that happening all over the place. So to talk in a new age style, because people seem to be more accepting of that than talking about religion, and a new age style, I will say this, that we are under a disease because we're no longer at ease with the world around us. And I think that's one of the best ways to look at it, is that we have forgotten where we came from, where we're going, who we are. We forgot our cultural knowledge of what humanity is.
Right.
We are out for ourselves. We don't look after each other, even though we can see that one of the first burials in history actually predated the Homo sapien, and it was done by a Neanderthal. And that Neanderthal was actually injured and had to be taken care of until the day that he unfortunately passed. But he was left with grave goods because even those folks knew that there was something more than when we close our eyes and we, shuffle off this mortal coil. So we have to look at the world not only now, but also what's to come and what went before us as well. In order to understand the total picture, we can't just open up a book and read one line in one chapter. We have to open up from the very beginning and look out towards the end if we're going to get the complete picture of anything, my friends.
Yep.
Ronald, thank you very much. That's a great way to close this show. We've got to have you back.
I can't wait, my friends. Anytime you need.
And everybody go check out Ronald Murphy. And once again, that's Ronald Murphy on Facebook. And where else, Ron?
Amazon. It's Ronald L. Murphy Jr. on Facebook for my author page. And you guys can get in touch with me there too. I'd love to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Yes. And personally, we can get together, just chit chat around, because I'd love to pick your brain a lot more on the subjects. Don't forget, everybody, to subscribe to Texas Front Porch and Bigfoot Michigan Rob, along with the Cryptid Huntress Jessica Jones and Jason McLean of Serial Papers, and Bobby Van Buren from Van Buren Variety. Mondays is Texas Front Porch, 7:30 in the East. Tuesday, Beyond BMR, 9 in the East. Wednesdays, Jason McLean questions everything at 10 in the East. Followed up Thursday afternoon at 1 in the East. Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Serial Papers at 10 in the East on Thursday and Fridays. Remote viewing with the talented Jessica Jones. That's a mouthful. A lot of shows, a lot of variety for everybody. Once again, Ronald Murphy, thank you. And for text, for big text, BMR, as I'm going to pull a text. I'm looking for that button. We're going to be signing out shortly.
Well, don't forget Van Buren Varieties Tuesdays at 8.
Yes, I did mention it, but not the time. Thank you very much, text, for that. I found the extra. We'll see you later.